Even Benjamin Franklin mentioned, "Do this in the morning, and your brain will become superhuman." Have you ever woken up in the morning feeling sluggish, your mind still hazy from sleep, and wish there was a magic key to unlock your brain's full potential at the very start of the day? If so, you're not alone. From ancient mystics to modern productivity gurus, people across centuries have sought that special routine or practice capable of transforming ordinary mornings into engines of creativity and clarity. Yet perhaps one of the greatest early advocates of a revolutionary morning habit was none other than Benjamin Franklin, scientist, inventor, statesman, and philosopher. His countless accomplishments raise an intriguing question. Could there be something he did each morning that helped propel his mind to superhuman heights of innovation and insight? Stay with me until the end, because I promise to share not only Franklin's own time-tested practice, but also how contemporary neuroscience might support this seemingly simple approach. You might discover that you've been overlooking one of the most powerful and remarkably accessible ways to prime your brain for success right from the moment you rise. By now, almost everyone knows Benjamin Franklin as one of America's founding fathers, the polymath who never stopped learning or experimenting. He invented bifocal glasses, charted the Gulf Stream, played a key role in the drafting of the Declaration of Independence, and was a pivotal figure in establishing the public library system. Yet behind all these achievements lay a very private, personal discipline. Franklin was a firm believer in daily rituals, which he codified in a meticulously designed schedule to guide his entire day, from morning until night. His famous approach to self-improvement included something he called his morning question, and references in his autobiography suggest that he also performed other morning-specific activities that sharpened his focus, enlivened his spirit, and prepared him to tackle the most pressing tasks. While Franklin himself might never have used the modern term superhuman brain, contemporary researchers increasingly recognize that strategic routines can indeed elevate cognitive performance beyond what we typically assume is possible. In the last few decades, neuroscience has confirmed that early morning habits, ranging from certain forms of meditation to journaling to intentional cold exposure, can have measurable effects on neurotransmitters, stress hormones, and even the structural wiring of the brain. It's as if Franklin intuited centuries ago what modern science is only now proving. The conditions under which we greet our day can resonate through every aspect of our mental function. If you stick around to the end, we'll sift through the evidence and distill exactly how you can apply Franklin's insights to turn your own morning into a springboard of limitless potential. But let's not rush. For this story to fully unfold, we should first step back in time and immerse ourselves in Franklin's 18th century world. Picture colonial America, a time of candlelit evenings, no electric gadgets to beep and buzz you awake, and no highways teeming with cars to jolt you into alertness. Life was comparatively quieter, governed largely by natural rhythms of light and dark. People tended to wake early out of necessity. Artificial lighting was expensive and rudimentary. Franklin famously believed in rising at the crack of dawn, coining expressions that still linger today, such as, "Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise." But did he stop at just advocating an early wake-up? Hardly. Franklin's journals and writings hint at a more nuanced ritual. If you flip through the pages of Franklin's autobiography, you'll discover a meticulously drawn daily schedule. Each hour of the day had its purpose. His morning block wasn't just about getting out of bed and stumbling into chores. He reserved it for what he termed addressing powerful goodness and for asking himself, "What good shall I do this day?" before diving into planning. While seemingly unassuming, these lines point to a profound mental shift. Franklin wasn't merely checking tasks off a list. He was setting an overarching intention, one anchored in moral purpose and personal development. You might say he was priming his neurons to operate on a higher plane of clarity and altruism. This notion of a morning question is especially compelling. Modern psychologists have found that our self-talk, particularly in the first part of the day, can significantly shape how we perceive events and tackle problems. Imagine if you programmed your subconscious by asking something like, "What good shall I do this day?" From the moment your eyes open, your mind would unconsciously seek ways to fulfill that objective, spotting opportunities and creative solutions you might otherwise overlook. That is precisely what Franklin was doing. Instead of letting chance or mood set the tone, he grabbed the reins and steered his mental energy toward productivity and benevolence. But Franklin's morning habits didn't end with lofty questions. Anecdotes and less formal references throughout his letters and the recollections of his contemporaries suggest he also practiced what he called air baths. This was a quirky routine where he'd spend time in the early mornings standing or sitting in his room, often nude or lightly clothed, exposing himself to fresh air while reading or writing. Odd as it sounds, Franklin believed this invigorated his body and mind, akin, perhaps, to how modern enthusiasts praise the mental clarity that comes from short bouts of cold exposure or fresh air therapies. While we don't have the rigorous controlled studies Franklin lacked, it's not too big a leap to see parallels with contemporary research on thermoregulation and improved alertness. Some scientists now hypothesize that mild environmental stress, like cold air, can spark neurochemical cascades that rev up your cognitive capacities. Franklin's air baths might well have contributed to the famously agile mind that negotiated alliances in Europe and penned incisive essays under various pseudonyms. Now, let's weave these historical details with modern scientific insights. When you wake up, your brain transitions from a state dominated by delta and theta waves associated with sleep to alpha waves, a more relaxed yet aware state, and eventually to beta waves, the frequency range typically linked to active, focused thinking. This transitional window is highly malleable. If you greet the morning with stress, say, checking frantic emails or doom-scrolling news, your body surges with cortisol and adrenaline. While these stress hormones can momentarily sharpen focus, chronic elevation can impede higher cognitive functions and hamper creativity. Franklin's approach, intentionally shaping the day with reflection, moral purpose, and possibly a bracing exposure to fresh air, tilted his neurochemistry toward calm alertness rather than anxious reactivity. It's like stepping onto a path that leads to consistent mental performance rather than a roller coaster of stress spikes. Let's pause here for a brief question, one I'd love for you to consider and answer in the comments. How do you currently spend the first 15 to 20 minutes of your morning? And do you feel it sets a positive or negative tone for your day? Take a moment to reflect. Perhaps you scroll through social media in bed, or maybe you rush through your routine, mentally rehearsing your daily to-do list. Do you think those first few minutes support your cognitive well-being, or might they be inadvertently sabotaging it? This question is important because recognizing your current pattern is often the first step to changing it in a way that aligns with Franklin's principles and the science of brain optimization. To appreciate how Franklin might have stumbled upon these powerful tactics, it's helpful to remember his voracious appetite for self-improvement. He once famously outlined 13 virtues, things like temperance, silence, order, resolution, and devised a chart to track his adherence to each. This systematic self-monitoring not only helped him refine his character, but also gave him a framework to test new habits. While we don't have direct evidence of Franklin systematically tracking the efficacy of his morning routine, his broader pattern of self-experimentation strongly suggests he was always measuring how his habits influenced his sense of clarity and purpose. It's also noteworthy that Franklin lived in an era when coffee houses were hubs of intellectual and political exchange. He likely saw the stimulating effects of coffee not only as a social lubricant, but also as a mental booster. Modern science supports the idea that a moderate amount of caffeine can enhance focus, vigilance, and even memory consolidation. However, Franklin's routine, from what we can glean, didn't revolve solely around coffee, though he did enjoy it. He layered multiple facets: intention setting, fresh air, reflection, reading, moral calibration, into a comprehensive ritual that touched mind, body, and spirit. This layering approach is precisely what many modern performance experts recommend, a stack of simple synergistic habits that collectively catapult your cognitive state. If you were to attempt a Benjamin Franklin-inspired morning, you might do something like this. Awaken without immediately checking your phone. Spend a few minutes in quiet reflection or prayer while allowing natural light to filter into the room. Ask yourself a purposeful question such as, how can I create value or help someone today? Then, if it's feasible and you don't mind a little chill, expose yourself to fresh air, perhaps by opening a window and taking a few deep, slow breaths or stepping briefly outside. This physically invigorating process can also deliver mental sharpness as your brain receives a gentle burst of oxygen. Finally, maybe you enjoy a warm beverage while journaling your goals or reading something thoughtful. Even if you could devote only 15 or 20 minutes to this process, it could pivot your entire day from reactive chaos to proactive clarity. In Franklin's time, these types of practices required no special technology, just discipline and a willingness to experiment. Today, ironically, we have many tools that can either help or hinder our morning routine. Alarm apps, guided meditations on YouTube, wearable devices that track sleep cycles. We're swamped with possible biohacks. Yet the principle remains the same. Shape your morning environment to bolster a calm, focused mind that's ready to solve problems and create new ideas. Franklin's approach was simply more holistic, integrating moral and philosophical reflection into the standard physical routines. That emphasis on both internal reflection and external environment could be what gave him an edge. His version of superhuman cognition was a synergy of personal values and mental discipline. Here's a historical anecdote that might further illustrate the power of Franklin's morning routine. There's a story, though partly apocryphal, that Franklin carried a small notebook wherever he went, noting ideas, tasks, observations, or moral lessons as they struck him. Each morning, while practicing his air bath or engaging in quiet reflection, he'd glance at these notes, identifying which concepts deserved deeper thought or immediate action. This practice of capturing ideas before the day's busyness swept him away, ensured he never lost a spark of innovation. In modern terms, it's akin to a brain dump or the famed GD, getting things done, method adapted to an 18th century context. The principle is timeless. If you don't anchor your insights in the earliest part of the day, you risk losing them amid the swirl of obligations that follow. We should also consider Franklin's personal temperament. He was a witty, curious man who authored satirical essays under pseudonyms like Silence Dogood and Poor Richard. Perhaps the comedic dimension of his thinking, the ability to see the absurdities in life, fostered a kind of mental flexibility that was well-suited to brainstorming and problem-solving. Modern psychologists note that a playful, open mind is often more creative, more adept at lateral thinking. Franklin's early morning journaling or reading might have created a protective bubble of playfulness before he dove into the day's serious affairs. In that sense, his morning routine offered a safe space for cognitive play, fueling the comedic brilliance and innovative leaps that appear so frequently in his biography. By the time mid-morning arrived, Franklin would typically transition to professional tasks, whether diplomatic duties, printing work, or scientific experiments. But he set the tone by ensuring his mental state was primed, not frayed. From the vantage point of 21st century neuroscience, we can see how crucial that prime time can be. Cortisol levels are naturally higher in the morning, and if we greet the day with mindful practices, we shape that hormonal surge in beneficial ways. If, on the other hand, we meet it with anxiety or mental chaos, the stress response can compound, leading to fatigue, irritability, and impaired decision-making. Franklin's method, though shaped by his era, was surprisingly sophisticated for harnessing this circadian window. To remain balanced, let's also acknowledge that daily routines can vary based on individual differences. Not everyone is a morning person, and some might do their best thinking in the late evening. Franklin's example, while compelling, isn't a universal blueprint. Still, for those who do have the opportunity to embrace an early start, the synergy of intention setting, mild physical stimulation, like fresh air, reflective reading or journaling, and moral self-examination stands as a potent cocktail. It's not an overstatement to say that these combined elements might help your brain operate at a level that feels almost superhuman compared to a chaotic or phone-addicted morning. Let's ask a second question here, one that might spur further reflection. If you could incorporate only one Franklin-esque habit into your morning routine, be it a meaningful question, a brief air bath, journaling, or something similar, what would you choose and why? Share your answer in the comments. Sometimes, committing to just one powerful change is more feasible and less intimidating than a complete overhaul of your life. By identifying that single morning practice, you can start to see incremental benefits in focus, mood, and problem-solving ability. Beyond personal productivity, it's worth noting how Franklin's morning methodology might have also shaped his interpersonal effectiveness. He was renowned for his diplomatic skills, especially during his time in France, where his wit and charm helped secure essential support for the American Revolution. A person who regularly engages in self-reflection and sets positive intentions is likely more empathic, more attuned to social nuances. Those morning moments of moral calibration, asking what good shall I do today, might have reinforced a mindset of service and cooperation. When you consistently remind yourself of your better values, you prime your brain to act on them. That can lead to more considerate interactions, stronger relationships, and a leadership style that inspires trust. Franklin's entire legacy, scientific, political, cultural, was built on the foundation of such trust. His morning habit played no small part in that. Now, let's traverse the centuries and connect Franklin's daily discipline to the modern phenomenon of journaling for mental clarity. One of the most popular forms is the morning pages concept made famous by Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way, a simple practice of writing out streams of consciousness as soon as you wake up. People report breakthroughs in creativity, problem-solving, and emotional well-being. Cameron's approach resonates strongly with Franklin's more structured morning writings. The difference is that Franklin's method was often guided by his virtues and sense of moral duty, while morning pages encourages free-form expression. But the underlying principle, purging mental clutter, clarifying intentions, and opening up mental space for innovative thinking, remains consistent. So whether you prefer a disciplined approach or a more freewheeling, expressive style, the outcome is often the same: a sharper, freer mind. Another parallel is the modern trend of gratitude journaling, which researchers link to better mental health and heightened optimism. While Franklin didn't specifically label his morning reflection as gratitude practice, his focus on addressing powerful goodness implies a reverence for life's blessings and a sense of humble responsibility. This subtle orientation might cultivate a mindset that is simultaneously confident because you recognize your ability to contribute, and humble because you're mindful of forces greater than yourself. That blend of humility and self-efficacy has been found in modern psychology to be especially effective in fostering resilience and success. What about the superhuman brain, part of our promise? The phrase is intentionally dramatic, but it reflects a genuine possibility. Consistent, mindful mornings can lead to cognitive performance that feels extraordinary compared to an unstructured, anxious morning routine. Neuroplasticity research tells us our brains adapt to the habits we practice regularly. If, daily, you start your morning calm, reflective, purposeful, and slightly physically invigorated, your neurons form circuits that make it easier to reproduce that state. Over time, you might notice improved concentration, faster recall, or more agile problem-solving during the day. This doesn't mean you'll literally become omniscient, but you might function closer to your natural cognitive limits. And that can feel superhuman when you compare it to the mental fog or distractibility you once accepted as normal. Moreover, the benefits of a superhuman morning brain extend beyond just feeling sharp. It can affect your emotional regulation, creativity, and even moral decision-making. Franklin's entire life seemed guided by a synergy of practicality, creativity, and ethical commitment. His morning ritual likely acted as the seed from which these qualities could blossom. A modern individual aiming to replicate that synergy might blend the following. Mindful wake-up, use a gentle alarm, and resist the urge to check your phone. Intentional question, ask something akin to what good shall I do today, or how will I practice kindness or creativity this morning? Body activation, open a window, step outside, or do a brief stretching routine, something that gets blood flowing and your lungs full of fresh air. Focused reflection, spend 5 to 10 minutes journaling. This can be free-form or guided by specific prompts. Time for gratitude. Note a few things you're thankful for. They can be small or large, but sincerity is key. Moral or value check. Remind yourself of your personal principles or virtues, imagining how they'll inform your day. By implementing just these steps, you might find your mind is significantly more engaged and capable than usual, perhaps even deserving the term superhuman compared to a typical, rushed morning. That's precisely the transformation Franklin was hinting at, albeit filtered through the lens of 18th century language and customs. As if his day's start weren't impressive enough, Franklin would also end his evenings with another question. What good have I done today? This symmetrical approach, morning reflection plus evening accountability, creates a feedback loop where each day's experiences feed into the next morning's intentions. That iterative cycle fosters consistent personal growth, an evolving sense of mission, and unwavering mental discipline. In the 21st century, many high achievers replicate this pattern, often calling it bookending the day with mindfulness. Franklin was effectively a pioneer of that notion, quietly practicing it long before the modern personal development industry gave it a name. Let's consider the bigger picture. Franklin lived in a world brimming with possibility, where science was advancing swiftly, new territories were being explored, and societies were forging new political systems. He thrived in that environment not just because he was brilliant, but because he had the mental fortitude and adaptability to harness the era's opportunities. Arguably, we live in a similarly transformative age. Technology is revolutionizing work, communication, and knowledge at breakneck speed. If anything, the challenge of staying mentally grounded has only increased. Franklin's morning routine, which gave him clarity and resilience, could be even more vital today, helping us sift through information overload, social media distractions, and the relentless pace of modern life. This is why Franklin's name continues to surface among those seeking timeless wisdom. He was the quintessential Renaissance man in a colonial setting, a testament to the fact that broad, integrated thinking has no expiration date. Whether you're a software developer, an artist, an educator, or a policymaker, adopting a systematic approach to your morning can amplify your intellectual horsepower. The superhuman edge emerges from consistently nurturing the best version of your brain day after day, so that peak performance becomes your default mode. Now we come to the climactic payoff. You've stuck with me this far, so it's time to distill the essence of the one thing you can do in the morning to upgrade your brain's capacity. Here it is in plain terms. In the quiet stillness of morning, ground yourself with an intentional question that defines your purpose for the day. Then follow it with a brief but invigorating practice, be it fresh air exposure, prayer, journaling, or mindful movement that aligns your physical and mental states toward that purpose. This synergy of mental intention and embodied engagement can flip your brain's switches toward creativity, focus, and resilience. Over time, you'll likely notice how your daily approach transforms from reactive to proactive, from scattered to strategic, and from mildly functional to outstandingly effective. Is it revolutionary? In a sense, no. It's a deceptively modest formula. But simple doesn't mean ineffective. The reason it might feel so new is that many of us forget the potency of these foundational acts. We're swept away by the day's demands almost before we've had a chance to blink. Franklin reminds us that the more essential something is, the more carefully it should be done. Waking up is among the most fundamental transitions in our daily existence, and harnessing it intentionally can yield disproportionate benefits. Before we close, let's pose one final question. If you commit to trying Franklin's morning method for just 1 week, No phone for the first 15 minutes, a conscious question about your day's higher purpose, a brief period of fresh air or journaling. What positive changes do you anticipate might unfold in your mental clarity or overall life? Share your thoughts below. Setting a clear intention and anticipating benefits can make you far more likely to carry out the experiment. And who knows? Perhaps you'll discover a personal superpower hidden in plain sight, just as Franklin did centuries ago. In conclusion, the timeless wisdom of Benjamin Franklin's morning practice resonates across generations because it taps into fundamental truths about human cognition and motivation. By shaping the first moments of your day with deliberate focus on purpose, reflection, and gentle physical activation, you can shift your brain into a higher gear, a gear that modern neuroscience now explains in terms of neurotransmitter balance, neuroplasticity, and stress modulation. Franklin may not have had the scientific vocabulary to articulate these mechanisms, but his intuitive grasp of self-improvement was no less profound. So tomorrow, when you open your eyes to a new day, remember Franklin's guiding question: what good shall I do this day? And consider adding a dash of fresh air or reflective journaling. This small but powerful shift just might awaken that superhuman spark in your own mind, turning the ordinary process of getting out of bed into a daily miracle of focused intelligence, creativity, and moral clarity. And that, as Franklin might say, is the truest path to being healthy, wealthy, and wise.